Hi, I'm Dr. Gwyn Erwin, and welcome back to my channel, Healing for Your Life. Today we're going to begin to focus on the various ways of healing or resolving trauma. Now, a lot of people will say trauma can be healed, and that's true if it is intervened with quickly and processed, and the person is really assisted. Now, most of these kind of traumas are what we call event traumas, and they have a beginning and a middle and an end, as I've talked about in previous videos. And like 9/11 was a traumatic event. Sudden death, illness, losing a job, losing a home. I mean, there are all kinds of event traumas. Those people who suffer from those can get help from caregivers, experts, and other people who come to aid them in that trauma. Most trauma, though, is what we call relational or cumulative, meaning that it's woven in and out of daily life, and often within our families or close associations. And that's much harder to resolve. So many people live with these kinds of traumas, and more importantly, really, is that they live with the consequences of them, and so they're constantly being re-traumatized. So let's look at my 6 reasons why trauma does not get resolved. The first is in the original trauma experience, and especially with children, but it can be adults too, or adolescents. There is no one available to assist, comfort, soothe, regulate, and process the experience with the person who is being traumatized, especially significant caregivers. The second is that it is often the supposed caregivers or significant others who are perpetrating the trauma, rather than being the safe island that they're supposed to be. The third is that when they turn to help, a child, adolescent, or adult, when they turn to help or reach out for help, they are often ignored, or the experience is denied, or they're ridiculed, or belittled, or dismissed. The third is that there's no intervention, either in the original experience or in the consequences that follow that are re-traumatizing. The person is exposed again and again and again, from a beating parent to being deprived severely or neglected, sexually abused, financially abused, spiritually abused. There's no intervention, and so it repeats and repeats and repeats. The fifth is that there's no accountability for the perpetrator, and very often it is not unusual for the perpetrators to be more protected than the victims, which is gaslighting and crazy making. And lastly, the victims are left alone in their experience. If all of these things have not occurred to help them, they're left alone in the experience with what we call fright without solution. And then they have to turn to emotional, psychological methods to try to cope, where they either dissociate the experience or they develop around it, on top of it, through it, or they just become completely non-functioning or middle of the road functioning or high functioning while carrying these volcanoes of experience inside of them. So whether you are an adult, an adolescent, or a child where there is a teacher or mentor, someone that you can reach out to, the paths of healing are the opposite of what I've just talked about. First, you have to have significant people who are willing to process the experience with you. They have to be able to comfort and soothe, but more importantly, to really understand what has happened and help you start to make sense of it emotionally. Because for many, many people, most people, one of the profound effects of the trauma is how mind-numbing and confusing it is. So you need a partner, whether it's a mentor or a therapist, or a family member who is safe, or a friend to really help you process that. The next is that they have to be safe. You have to be able to turn to somebody who is safe, whether it's an organization or an individual. The third is that they need to be taken seriously. Now, I'm not talking about, fictionalized something because a kid is mad, and so they accuse the parents of something. Of course, there have to be careful investigations and careful looks into what is really going on. But the person doing the investigation and helping that individual has to take their experience seriously enough to do that investigating and finding out what is really going on. And then there have to be interventions. And the interventions are to create physical safety, sexual safety, financial safety, spiritual, mental, emotional. Emotional abuse is prolific. You have to find a way to create safety. And there are many avenues for that, but you need help in doing it. And then the perpetrators need to be held accountable, but only after the victim or the survivor has had the help that they need and they are safe to get that, have that intervention and accountability occur. And that there are people who can confront the perpetrator and really do something about it. And then that solves the last problem because the person is no longer alone. They are companioned in getting help. They are companioned in finding a new, safe way to live and to rebuild their lives in whatever ways that they need to do it. So these are the fundamentals of resolving unresolved trauma. And I hope you could begin there and know that if you or someone you know needs help, reach out to me via my website, www.drgwynerwin.com. Thanks so much. I'll see you soon. Bye.